Welcome back to the Big Tire Garage. Today's video is all about this bad boy right here. This is a 4L80E 4-speed heavy-duty automatic transmission. Now this video is not going to be about how to rebuild this transmission. I'm going to show you what makes the 4L80 such a good option for hardcore off-road. This particular one is a 2-wheel drive transmission because it's going in my 60 C10 pre-runner, but everything that I do to this transmission would also apply to a 4-wheel drive unit as well. The main thing that I'm going to be doing today is showing you all the steps that you need to take to properly install a full manual valve body inside your 4L80E. Because yes, the 4L80E, the E does stand for electronically controlled. So there is a computer required to make this transmission shift, but you don't have to do it. You can convert it over to a full manual valve body, and that is because 90% of this transmission on the inside is the exact same as possibly one of the most popular heavy-duty off-road transmissions, and that is the Turbo 400. So you can convert the 4L80E over to a full manual valve body. It just takes a little bit of work. And yes, to do it correctly, the transmission does have to come out of the vehicle. So that's what today's video is going to be about. I'm going to show you what makes this transmission so cool and so strong, and also the proper way to install that full manual valve body so you can ditch the computer. But like always here at the Big Tire Garage, the first thing we're going to do is grab a cup of coffee. All right, so all joking aside, I know this music doesn't necessarily match your standard automotive rebuild video, but the truth is, whenever I work on an automatic transmission, I find it incredibly relaxing, and that is because this is possibly one of my favorite jobs to do inside a shop. I have always been intrigued by automatic transmissions. I spent many years on the bench rebuilding them as a full-time job. When I was a high school shop teacher, I always made sure to include full automatic transmission rebuilding as part of my senior automotive tech course in the high school that I taught at. And once you understand how an automatic transmission works, all the mystery goes away, and it's just a really, really fun job to tackle. Another nice thing about the 4L80 is the fact that it's just like the 400 in that it's not an incredibly difficult transmission to tear down and rebuild, and you don't need a lot of special tools to do it. Right here, this is where the transmission is essentially the exact same as a Turbo 400. So the difference between the 4L80 and the 400 is the 80 has essentially this piston and clutch pack on the top, this additional set of planetaries right here. But from here down, it's the exact same as a 400. So if we had a 400 on this bench, there'd be the pump, there'd be this clutch pack right here, and we'd look inside the transmission, and the part that we're seeing right down there would essentially be sitting right here in the case. As a matter of fact, the band apply pin, which is right here in the 4L80, on the Turbo 400, it's right about here, and that's where the band would sit. And that's what makes the 4L80 so amazing, is the fact that essentially it's a Turbo 400 with an extra set of planetaries and a clutch pack just stacked on top of the internal components. Everything is the exact same. And Turbo 400s are incredibly strong. They are a brute force transmission that can handle tons of abuse off-road, lots of high heat, insane gear changes from like full throttle reverse to full throttle first gear, and they do not fail. They are, in my opinion, one of the best transmissions for hardcore off-road use. Plus, you can buy a whole bunch of upgrade parts if you're trying to upgrade it for massive amounts of horsepower, even upgraded cases. Now, you can get an upgraded case for the 4L80 as well, but this truck doesn't need it. This isn't some crazy race truck. This is just a fun little pre-runner type truck that I'm building. It really isn't going to be pushing that much horsepower, even though it does have twin turbos on top of it. So right now, I'm just basically going to freshen up this transmission. I know the transmission was good because when I bought it, I was able to watch a video of it driving and shifting. So I don't think there's any surprises in here. I'm just going to go through the entire transmission, replace all the clutches, all the steels, and throw a bunch of upgraded parts that I got from Monster Transmission into it. I will be converting this over to a full manual valve body, and when I do that, I'll go through all those processes as we go through it. But if you are installing a full manual valve body into your 4L80, just know you're going to have to tear down the transmission at least to this point right here. So it is a good idea at the same time to inspect all the clutches and steels. For this episode of Storytime, I thought I'd tell you about my personal relationship with the 4L80E transmission. Now, the 4L80E came out in the 1990-1991 model year. It was put in General Motors heavy-duty pickup trucks. So we're talking about 3/4 tons and up pickup trucks, dualies, Suburbans, and some large vans. Now, at that point in time, I was working at a General Motors dealership in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. I had just written my mechanic's license, and I was being trained on how to become a full-time driveline and transmission specialist at the dealership. Now, when General Motors came out with a new item like this 4L80E transmission, what they would do at that time is they would have training courses for all the technicians who are going to be working on that item in the future. So what that meant for me is I had to travel a couple hours away to a specialized GM training center, and a small group of us, I think it was about 6 or 8 people, they were all other transmission technicians from different dealerships all over the province. Sidebar, for those of you that don't know, a province is like a state, only much larger. We would then get together and we would learn about that particular item, and in this case, it was the 4L80E transmission. We spent about 3 days, if I remember correctly. In the mornings, you'd learn the theory of everything, so we learned electrical diagnosis, hydraulic fluid flow, troubleshooting, basic stuff that we were going to expect to see with these transmissions as they showed up at our dealership for either warranty claims or repairs. Now, in the afternoons, we'd rebuild the transmissions, and in the case of this transmission, we'd rebuild a 2-wheel drive one, we'd rebuild a 4-wheel drive one, we'd learn about all the special tools that we would need to use to basically take it apart, put it back together, and I do believe we actually took one out of a vehicle and reinstalled it just to make sure that we knew everything that we would need to know before returning to our dealership to tackle these jobs on our own. Now, you have to remember, this is prior to basically Zoom classes and online learning and all that kind of stuff. That stuff didn't exist. So these in-person classes were the only way that you could learn about stuff like this. And that is how General Motors did it, to make sure their technicians were always trained. Now, when we were in the class, the instructor that was teaching the class told us that the reason that the 4L80E was designed was because General Motors didn't want to keep putting turbo 400s in their heavy-duty pickup trucks because obviously it's only a 3-speed automatic transmission. And at the time, the only other option was the 700R4, which at that point in time was transitioning into the 4L60 and the 4L60E. The 4L60E and the 4L80E were General Motors' first 4-speed electronically controlled transmissions, and I have another story about that I'm saving for later on in this video. But when we were in the class, we were told by the instructor that the problem was they had customers who were buying Chevy pickup trucks with the 4-speed automatic transmission, and it was a 4-wheel drive truck, and they were using it to plow snow. Now, for those of you that don't know what plowing snow is all about, it's basically you strap a big old blade into the front of your truck, and you're basically pushing snow off of your driveway or out of your parking lot. And as you can imagine, when you're doing that, there's a lot of shifts that go from reverse to first, reverse to first, constantly back and forth as you're moving that snow. And you're doing those shifts under load and under partial or sometimes even full throttle. And the 4L60 was not surviving. They were basically tearing themselves apart. I remember at that time on the bench, I was probably rebuilding one 4L60 or 4L60E a week when it was winter time and these guys were trying to plow snow with these 1500 pickup trucks. The instructor told us that the 4L80E was specifically designed to eliminate that problem. And he said that the 4L80E could handle full throttle reverse to first shifts with no failures. We, of course, being a bunch of smart alecky mechanics at the time, said there's no way. There's absolutely no way that's possible. So we called his bluff and said there's no way you could do that. Maybe in the snow, but certainly not on dry asphalt. So the instructor took us outside and we all piled into a giant 2500 Suburban, and he proceeded to do multiple, I think it was about 10, full throttle, reverse to first shifts in the parking lot of the GM training centers as the tires were just boiling down. And he just held that thing to the rug and went reverse to first, reverse to first. The truck sounded like it was gonna come apart like nobody's business. And then we pulled it inside and drained the fluid. The fluid still looked good. And we actually even took the transmission out of that particular truck as part of the course, and we inspected it, and no damage inside. And why? Because the 4L80E has the same internals for the majority of it as the Turbo 400. And the Turbo 400 was designed to handle that kind of abuse. It's just an incredibly strong transmission. The 4L80 survived for many years. We're talking about 1990 to 2009. That is a long time for a transmission to be used. Think of the horsepower gains inside those years of vehicle models. 1990, I mean, what, a 454 was making maybe 265 horsepower? You're into the late 2009 area. You're talking about LS engines, 6 liters, things that are making huge amounts of power. And then add the aftermarket guys that are doing stuff to it out on top of that. The transmission is incredibly strong, which makes it a perfect option for your hardcore off-road vehicle. So swapped out all my clutches and steels. They were all in great shape, but I do need to make some changes to the drum on this setup. So the valve body that I'm installing is a basically full manual reverse shift pattern, no engine braking, no trans brake valve body. So this valve body is simply a big old chunk of billet aluminum, and it replaces this incredibly complicated valve body right here. Now I mentioned before that this 4L80 is electronically controlled, and all of that happens inside this valve body. Inside here we have a couple of shift solenoids. We have what's called a manifold. So this basically measures the pressure inside the valve body. It tells the computer what gear you're actually in. You have a pressure solenoid up here. You have a lockup solenoid, and then you have a couple of accumulators up in here. And this is how the computer basically shifts this valve body. This all goes away and gets replaced with this bad boy right here. This makes the transmission 100% manual, no computer controlled whatsoever. So whatever gear I select will be the gear that I get. And this is a reverse manual. So now it goes park, reverse, neutral, and then the next is first, second, third, fourth down the shifter. And as I said before, no engine braking in this particular valve body because this isn't a rock crawler. It's kind of like a pre-runner. So I don't need any engine braking for that truck. Now, there is a lot of work that has to go on inside the transmission to make that valve body work. And it's all going to start just basically right here with the rear low band apply servo. A lot of this stuff is going to get changed. We're actually going to throw the majority of it away and just replace the piston with a heavy duty spring inside of here. But what I'm going to do right now is basically take you through all of the steps that you have to do to basically make this work. It is ideal to completely disassemble the transmission to do this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way through the instructions, and I'll show you every single step, step by step, so you can see how to make this valve body work in your 4L80. I'm going to start with the rear low band servo. I'm going to remove the inner piston and the large return spring, and I'm going to replace all of that with a new heavy-duty spring. I'm going to put a new seal on the large servo piston, and then it's ready to be installed. There's no modifications needed for this forward drum. I do have a new upgraded piston that I'm going to install in here, and then I can go ahead and just reassemble this forward drum and set it aside. The upgraded piston that I'm referring to is often referred to as a hyper blue piston. Now it is a bonded piston and lip seal setup that's designed to handle higher heat and more pressure inside the 4L80. And I'm also upgrading all of the friction material inside this transmission with Red Alto clutch discs and Teflon coated steels. There are a lot of modifications we have to make to the direct drum. We have to completely disassemble it. I need to drill a bleed hole underneath the piston before replacing it. And then I need to replace all of the springs inside of the direct drum with the ones included in the kit. And I also need to omit or remove the lip seal that is inside the drum. On the center support, we're going to remove this Teflon sealing ring. It's the second one from the top on this particular center support, and we're going to discard it and not reuse it. The final item we have to change is there's a fluid passage underneath this band apply pin that goes through the case and comes into the valve body right here. You can just barely see it. We need to drill and tap that 1/4-20 and then put a set screw in it to block that fluid passage from allowing that fluid to travel. Now I said drill and tap, but you don't have to drill the hole. It's the perfect size for the 1/4-20 tap to cut the threads in already. Once we have tapped that hole, you're probably going to be wondering, where is the 1/4-20 set screw that you need to plug it with? Now, there's a hole on the top of the valve body, your new valve body, right here, that this little set screw is going to be screwed into. This set screw opening is for the lube pipe that you're going to install on the 97 and up transmission. So the 97 and up transmission, we're going to be using this hole. And so we're going to be taking this set screw out and using it in the hole that we just drilled and tapped. If you were doing this on a 97 and down, I don't know what you would do because they did not include a set screw with the parts and pieces for the transmission. So in that case, you'd probably want to run down to your local Harbor Freight and just pick up one of these 150-piece set screw kits just to have in your toolbox. But I'm going to be using this set screw that came out of the valve body to go down in that hole. I'm going to put a little bit of red Loctite on it just to make sure that it doesn't come out. Another thing to note, because this particular manual valve body does not have engine braking, we leave out the intermediate band. That's the small thin band that sat right inside here. We also leave out the servo and the band apply pin that go in this section right here underneath the valve body. Now we're ready to bolt the valve body on. You will need to remove the manual valve from the original valve body. This is the basically the manual valve that connects to the shifter. Just basically pull it out of the original valve body and slide it into the new valve body. It's a good idea to inspect it, make sure there's no nicks or scratches on any of the spools on the spool valve, and it basically should slide right in. There are two check balls that go inside this valve body. There's two locations for them, one right here and one right here, and they're small nylon check balls. You just basically install them and then put the spacer plate on after that. Couple of final things about this valve body install before we put the pan on. I got the lube pipe in, had to modify the clamp to use this bolt to bolt it down, not a big deal. This is the torque converter lockup solenoid. I don't plan to use it, but I am going to wire it into a couple of wires in the factory harness just in case I ever want to use it in the future. I did repurpose this harness hold down clip just to make sure the harness isn't just floating around all willy-nilly inside the basically transmission pan. And then I can find no information about these two threaded ports on this valve body. They don't mention it in the instructions. I can't find anything online about it, but the kit does come with these two plugs. So I'm assuming that we want to plug these two ports with these plugs so they're just not open. There is a valve body passage underneath each one of these, so it looks like the fluid is trying to come through here, as well as on this one, it looks like it's coming through this direction right here. So aside from chasing the entire valve body to figure out where they go, I'm just going to install these 2 plugs, and if there's an issue, then I'll start by pulling those 2 out. But we'll put these 2 in with some blue Loctite, then we'll drop the pan on. So hopefully this video answered your questions as to what makes the 4L80 such a great overdrive automatic transmission, and also how to convert it over to a full manual valve body. This is the first time I've used one of these Speedmaster valve bodies inside an 80. I've used them quite often in my Turbo 400 rebuilds, but this is the first time I've done it in one of these 4-speed automatics. Keep up with me on social media and I'll let you know how much I like it or dislike it, because there are some other options out there. Right now, the transmission is ready to go back in the truck. I'm gonna throw it on the jack, drop it a new torque converter. We're gonna run about a 2,800, 3,200 RPM stall, which should be perfect for the engine package that's in this truck. And then we can slip it back in.